It all started with a letter. Just a thin piece of paper, seemingly innocuous, until I read the words printed on it. Remove your boat from the lake within 48 hours or face a $500 fine per day. I froze. Then I laughed. Then my blood boiled. Because here's the part they forgot to mention. The lake is mine. Not technically mine. Not shared HOA property. Mine. Transferred, inherited, and privately owned for 3 generations. But here they are, the Maple Creek Estates Homeowners Association, lecturing me like I'm a rule-breaking tenant instead of someone whose land they've been freeloading off for years. They think they can intimidate me. What they don't realize is that this little letter has just turned the first domino, and once it starts to fall, there's no stopping what comes next. Buckle up. This isn't just some petty HOA dispute. This is what happens when the wrong people poke the wrong bears. By the way, where are you watching from? Leave a comment below. I want you to have a front row seat to this, because I guarantee you'll enjoy watching these self-righteous HOA tyrants get what they deserve in one of the most satisfying takedowns I've ever had the pleasure of doing. My name is Jake Sullivan. 6 months ago, I was just another exhausted face in Silicon Valley's relentless grind, building a cybersecurity startup for nearly a decade, surviving sleepless nights and fierce competition. Then, after our company was acquired by a tech giant, I suddenly found myself 40 years old, drained, and free for the first time. I walked away quietly. No press, no announcements, just craving silence and stillness. That's when I remembered the old family cabin by Lake Sullivan, a place far from chaos and noise. Back in the 1950s, my grandfather James Sullivan, a humble commercial fisherman, bought the 50-acre lake and woods, not for money, but for peace. He built the cabin with his own hands, making it the heart of our summers. The lake was his sanctuary, his church. I remember fishing beside him in his creaky aluminum boat, hearing his wisdom. Water is life, Jake. Take care of it, and it will take care of everything else. That lake is my legacy, bloodline, not just inherited land. Anyone who tries to control it is invading more than property. They're invading memory. Everything felt perfect until the morning I found a neon orange HOA notice crudely stuck to my grandfather's old boat. A harsh reminder of who really rules here. Notice of violation. It was printed in black ink, like a scream on paper. I opened it and skimmed through the contents, my jaw clenching with each word. Apparently, my grandfather's boat was now an unlicensed vessel, and, listen, aesthetic nuisance. The HOA requested that it be removed from the lake entirely, citing that it was visually inconsistent with community standards. Oh, and it wasn't registered with the HOA or had the proper community stickers. At first I laughed. Surely this was a joke, a mistake, perhaps the sarcastic idea of a neighbor. But then I returned to the cabin and found the official letter in my mailbox. A crisp white envelope, letterhead flower, and the smug signature of one Richard Wilkins, HOA president. That's when I knew. This is not a mistake. This is war. I was still holding the letter, my fingers numb with disbelief, when the phone rang. It was Ray Delgado, my nearest neighbor and, to this day, one of the few reasons I think this place still has some soul. "Good morning, Jake. I see the welcoming committee has finally found you," he said, his tone mixed with dry humor and something heavier underneath. I told him about the violation notice, about the letter, about Richard Wilkins and his $500 a day fine for daring to moor my boat on my own lake. There was a long pause on the line before Ray let out a breath. "Those HOA vultures have been circling for years," he muttered. "Ever since they built that development up north, they've acted like they own everything in sight. My grandfather would chase them away with a shotgun full of rock salt." That made me smile for a moment. Grandpa Sullivan was not a patient man when it came to dealing with intruders. But then Ray's voice dropped, becoming more serious. "You should know. They've been using your lake, Jake. Fishing tournaments, private club events, everything. They even named it Elite Fishing Club or some nonsense like that. Hell, they think they own it." Water. That was the moment everything changed, from annoyed to angry, from humiliation to invasion. and I was no longer playing fair. After hanging up with Rai, I sat down at my laptop and started digging. It didn't take long to figure out exactly what he was talking about. Right there, on the Maple Creek Estates HOA website, there's a full photo gallery proudly showcasing their annual lakeside fishing contest. Smiling men decked out in high-end fishing gear, holding their catches aloft like trophies, on my lake. They are not subtle in this matter either. Elite Fishing Club has page dedicated, boasting exclusive access to prime fishing waters and a calendar of upcoming events. As I clicked, image after image confirmed what Rai said. There were rows and rows of them. Dozens of the photos shows a large crowd gathered along the east shore, certainly my property. They had set up tents, fired up grills, and even set up a makeshift pier, presumably just for these events. And then I saw the latest post. Elite Fishing Championship. This Saturday. $5,000 prize. Fully catered lakeside barbecue. They are planning to hold a major tournament on my land without permission. Its boldness amazed me. I kept scrolling, flipping through years of posts and archived photos. With each post, my disbelief turned to cold fury. They had been doing this for at least 5 years, slowly infiltrating, taking advantage of the fact that no one lived full-time at the cabin. Over time, they quietly established themselves as the de facto owners of the lake. One post even mentioned Ho Sullivan, my grandfather's lake, is like the jewel of our community, as if they have the right to call it that. At that moment, I knew I needed more than anger. I need legal assistance, and I know exactly who to call. Emma didn't waste any time. As soon as I explained what was going on, about the HOA threatening me over my boat while quietly hosting tournaments on my lake, she went into legal mode. We'd known each other since college. Back then, she was the only person who could argue with a professor about property rights and walk away with a smile. Now she's a respected environmental attorney who spent years handling land use and water rights cases up and down the coast. So let me be clear, she said after I finished. You still own the lake, full ownership, including water rights, and they fine you for having a boat on it, while hosting annual events they never asked for permission to do? Exactly, I said. She laughed, short, sharp, unhappy. This is gold, legal and poetic. Over the next few days, while I remained silent, Emma dug through the county archives. She found original property deeds from the 1950s, when my grandfather bought the lake. She found a 2010 survey commissioned by my father that clearly defined the boundaries of the lake, the water, the shoreline, and an additional 15 feet above the high water mark. She even found HOA development proposals from years ago that specifically excluded Sullivan Lake from the Maple Creek Estates zoning. There, in black and white, she said, holding up the map. They never had authority. Not now. Never. While Emma handled the paperwork, I focused on the lake. Using a network of motion-activated cameras with night vision and cloud sync, I installed surveillance around key areas of the shoreline, the eastern edge, the temporary dock area, the walkway leading from the north end of Maple Creek. Within days, I was getting alerts on my phone whenever anyone entered the property. The footage showed HOA members launching boats, unloading fishing gear, setting up chairs. They moved like they belonged there, confident, routine, unhesitating. But we're not done yet. Emma suggested we talk to some of the longtime residents. Rai introduced us to 2 older couples who had lived in the area since the HOA was first established. Over coffee, we gently asked questions about how long these events had been going on, whether they had ever seen a formal agreement with the lake owner. One man, Gerald Walker, rubbed his face and sighed. I always thought something was wrong. They said, community pool, but I never saw any documentation. And a few years ago, I remember paying an extra HOA fee labeled pool maintenance and access. I thought that was legal. Now I'm not so sure. Another woman, Mrs. Langford, remembered my grandfather. He used to let the neighborhood kids fish at the dock, but he always made it clear. The lake was his. Always. With every piece of footage, every document, every first-hand account, our case became clearer and clearer. Flowers are not just taboo. They paved their own way through my family's land and painted their logo on it. They think silence is permission. No one will notice that. No one can resist. They were wrong. The email was sent Wednesday night. Mass distribution addressed to all Maple Creek Estates residents. They said it was just a regular HOA meeting. An agenda was attached. The time and location were listed. I almost deleted it. Mostly. But Emma stopped me. "This is your chance," she said. "Not to confront. Not yet. But to observe. Ask the right questions. Shake the tree and see what happens." So I went. The meeting was held at the Maple Creek Community Center, a faux classical building with white columns and a decorative fountain out front. Exactly the kind of place that tries to look important. I arrived early, sat in the back row, and watched residents trickle in. Most looked bored. Some looked annoyed. Some whispered in familiar groups, like churchgoers waiting for a sermon to end. Then Richard Wilkins walked in. In his mid-50s, smart and clean in a navy blue jacket with gold buttons, he looked exactly like the kind of man who would scold you for planting the wrong weed. His smile was calm and knowledgeable, but his eyes kept scanning the room, calculating. He didn't recognize me. Perfect. He charged into the meeting like a politician running for office, discussing mailbox standards, lawn height regulations, approved paint colors. No one asked questions. No one challenged him, until he got to the last item on the list. Lake use and regulations. I sat up straight. "We have received a report of an unauthorized boat being stored on community waters," Richard announced. "I would like to remind residents that all watercraft must be registered with the HOA and comply with aesthetic standards." I raised my hand. Everyone turned. Richard blinked, startled. "Yes, sir. In the back?" I stood there, calm but alert. "I wonder," I said, "when you say community water, who actually owns the lake?" A silence fell across the room. Richard's smile grew wider. "The lake is a common resource managed by the HOA. That was understood from the beginning of the development." I tilted my head. "It's managed by the HOA, but who holds the actual papers?" A ripple spread across the room. A man near the front shifted slightly in his chair. A woman frowned. "There have been long-standing agreements," said Richard. "But that is not the purpose of this meeting. If we're being fined for using the lake, I think we should ask who has the legal authority to enforce those regulations." I interrupted, still calm. At this point, some of the residents actually joined in, leaning forward. Richard's composure broke, only for a moment, but it was there. He glanced at the woman beside him, a serious-looking brunette, whom I later learned was Karen Mitchell, the HOA vice president. "Historic agreements have been made," he repeated, his voice now stronger, "and the HOA has managed activities on the lake in accordance with the community's expectations." I smiled, as if pleased. "Interesting. I'd love to see those documents sometime." He acted quickly, but the damage was done. I am no longer just an ordinary citizen. I was a variable he hadn't taken into account, and I still haven't stopped asking questions. When the meeting ended and everyone had packed up, I lingered near the back, scanning the room. Just then, a man in his 60s approached, tall, tanned, and wearing a fishing vest that probably cost more than my boat. "Never seen him before." He smiled, but there was no joy in his eyes. "Are you new here?" "I just moved into the Sullivan house," I replied. He raised an eyebrow. "Lake Sullivan? Didn't think anyone still owned it." "I agree," I said, and gave up. He hesitated, then held out his hand. "Gerald Thompson. I run the Elite Fishing Club." Of course he did. "Well, welcome," he said. "Big tournament this weekend. East Coast. Come see us." "Maybe," I said firmly. Just for a moment. But it was there, the panic, quickly buried. "There may be some misunderstanding about historical arrangements," he said, his voice losing some of its sweetness. "Perhaps it would be better if our lawyers spoke directly." He cleared his throat and changed the subject. "In the meantime, I advise you to cooperate on your ship. It would be unfortunate to start this relationship with a confrontation." The threat wasn't even subtle. It was gift-wrapped and delivered. I smiled at him too. "I will consider that advice." He drove away with quiet arrogance, always assuming that he would have the final say. But when I returned to the cabin, I found only the dock empty. My boat, my grandfather's boat, disappear. All that remained was a neon notice posted on a pole. Property violation. The boat had been impounded, confiscated because failure to comply with community standards. Must pay $750 fine and sign compliance agreement to get it back. Failure to request compensation within 30 days will result in auctioned as abandoned property. I stared at the water, my hands clenched. I am so angry, not just for stealing, not even for pride, but because I know exactly what this is, an opening blow. I called the sheriff's office. The deputy on the other end of the line didn't seem to want to get involved. Civil disputes, he said. HOA issues can get complicated. Right. Either the HOA has friends in the department, or they've been perpetuating this lie for so long that even law enforcement is starting to believe it. But I know the truth. And now, I have no intention of playing by their rules anymore. Emma arrived the next morning, just as the mist was beginning to lift off the lake. She stepped out of the car, briefcase in one hand and a travel mug in the other, her eyes scanning the shore before looking straight into mine. She did not greet me. Instead, "Did they take the boat?" I nodded. "Leave a notice on the dock as if it were a stolen cart. Say I have 30 days to pay the $750 fine, or they'll auction it off." As he turned away, I drifted toward the refreshment table. That's when I saw them. Richard Wilkins, Karen Mitchell, and Gerald again, huddled in tight conversation. "We need to speed up. He asks too many questions. Resolve the Sullivan situation, before it's too late." Karen glanced over, saw me, and quickly muttered something. The group dispersed. I stood still, coffee in hand, pretending to read the flyer pinned to the wall. But at that moment, everything changed. They were not only inconvenienced by my return, they were threatened by it. And it's obvious they have something to hide. I was just about to leave the parking lot when a snowmobile. His expression was all acting, polite smile, calculating eyes. "Mr. Sullivan, right? I don't believe that." He paused, then added, "As Richard Wilkins, president of HOA Maple Creek Estates." I didn't move. I didn't blink. He continued, his voice as smooth as lacquer. "I heard you just moved here." I returned his gaze and smiled just like him, friendly on the outside, white teeth on the inside. "I have no war." For a split second, something moved behind his eyes. Disappointment? Surprise? He recovered quickly. "That's right," he said. "All the properties in this area are part of a unified community vision. We pride ourselves on maintaining." He glanced toward my dock, his lips curving slightly. "For example, your boat looks a bit rough." He speaks very clearly. "How?" "Most people say mouse invasion." I tilted my head. "Really? And just out of curiosity, what gives your HOA the right to manage boats on a lake you don't own?" His jaw clenched, enough to notice. "What the hell are you asking? I mentioned at the meeting," he said, waving his hand dismissively. "The lake is under HOA management. It has been for years." I nodded, feigning casual interest. "That's fascinating. Because according to the Sullivan family deed, dated 1953, the lake is private property, owned outright, including water rights and shoreline buffers. Has anything changed recently that I'm not being told about?" The first time, the mask cracked. Emma let out a sigh that was half amused, half angry. "Not only is it arrogant, it's illegal." Inside the cabin, we laid everything out on the dining table. Old documents, survey maps, boundary reports, tax records, county maps scanned over the past 70 years. Sullivan's name was stamped on each as a watermark. Emma moves like a human in her surroundings, flipping through documents, highlighting lines, annotating margins. "These documents are solid," she said. "Your grandfather didn't just buy the lake. He documented them exactly. Water rights, shore access rights, buffer zones, everything. He covered angles I didn't even think of." I took out the 2010 survey my dad gave me. Emma compared it to the printed copy of the zoning she had brought with her. Perfect, she said. And here's the thing. The HOA's original development plan right here specifically excluded Sullivan Lake from their jurisdiction. This whole community water claim, that's fiction. We sat for a moment, both of us staring at the table. Not just the papers, but the ammunition. They built an empire from nothing, I said. Emma looked up. And you just became the fault line. We started to map out the strategy step by step. We will not confront them head on, not yet. We will monitor, document again. Build a case piece by piece until there is nothing left for them to deny. It's not just about your boat, Emma said, her voice even. They've trespassed, misrepresented ownership, possibly scammed their own residents, and if they're planning a development deal on top of all that. She didn't have to finish her sentence. I leaned back in my chair, looking out at the lake. They don't know what's going to happen. There was a knock on the door just after sunrise. I opened it, and there stood Richard Wilkins, dressed casually this time. No gold-buttoned jacket, no polished HOA podium. Just a button-down shirt, and the cautious smile reserved for men who know they've gone too far. Mr. Sullivan, he said, his voice warm as arsenic-laced tea. I was in the area and thought we could talk privately. Privately. I said nothing, just stepped aside. Let the wolf in. He walked around the cabin like a real estate agent, commenting on the rustic charm and beautiful views, while carefully avoiding the pile of legal papers spread across my dining table. He didn't sit down until I did. I want to clear things up, he began. There has been some tension, misunderstanding, and I think we can work this out like reasonable men. I raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. He pulled out a folder and slid a page onto the table. You can keep your boat, he said. No fines, no other action. All we ask is that you sign this simple agreement acknowledging the HOA's oversight of activities on the lake. I didn't touch the paper, just looked at him. This is personal legal fiction disguised as a compromise, I said bluntly. He was undeterred. We are working on a solution, Mr. Sullivan. You get peace. We get consistency. It is a win-win for both sides. I smiled, calm and collected. That's funny. I don't remember inviting anyone to manage my pond. There was a pause, then his tone changed. There are economic opportunities ahead. Projects are in the early planning stages, and if you are willing to cooperate, then there may be a seat at the table. There. This time it's not a threat. It's a bribe. What kind of project are we talking about? I asked casually as I reached for my coffee cup. His eyes narrowed. Just a hypothesis at this stage. Nothing confirmed. That's right. A hypothetical resort complex, including condos, a golf course, and a marina, built on the East Coast, right where you host your tournaments. His smile disappeared. Where did you hear that? I didn't hear that, I said. I get it. Investors, flyers. You're not very subtle. For the first time, Richard looked genuinely confused. He picked up the file, stood up, and forced a smile on his face. Okay, he said, his voice more strained now. I'll let our attorney continue the conversation. In the meantime, consider the offer. I'll think about it, I said, after my lawyer looks into it. He paused at the door. We don't want to push this any further. I looked him straight in the eye. Then maybe you shouldn't have taken my boat. And then he left. But his mask was cracked, and I had all the evidence I needed to break it. The morning of the tournament was cool, warm, and unusually quiet. From the deck, binoculars in hand, I watched the trucks roll by like clockwork. Trailers carrying shiny fishing boats, SUVs loaded with coolers, tents, and too many folding chairs. By 8 o'clock a.m., the East Coast, my beach sea, full of people. Emma stood next to me, camera slung over her shoulder, recording the scene. They're not even pretending anymore, she muttered. I counted at least 20 carts, 15 boats, and at least 40 people, all on your land. Keep watching, I said. It gets better. Just after 9 o'clock, Gerald Thompson arrived. He was dressed in full elite angler's gear, vest, hat, reflective sunglasses. He looked like some kind of eccentric general commanding a private navy. He gave orders, shook hands, posed for pictures. A large banner hung from 2 trees. 15th Annual Elite Fishing Championship, Lake Sullivan. Emma zoomed in with her DSLR, capturing everything. License plates, faces, event signs, the makeshift dock that jutted proudly out into the lake. Then her camera stopped. Look, she said, lowering the lens. The East Coast. 2 men in suits, a woman in heels. They didn't come here to fish. I followed her gaze. 3 overdressed people moved slowly along the shore, one holding a portfolio, another pointing toward the water, and a woman flipping through a brochure I recognized from the HOA website. A resort plan. Investors, I said. Wilkins is showing off the land like it's his. Emma's voice chilled. Let's get closer. Hiding in the trees, we heard Richard's sales pitch. Exclusive lakeside development. No resistance from the community. We already manage the lake. Ownership is just a formality. Emma snapped long lens photos of him handing out promo materials, pointing at future docks and luxury apartments. He's selling a pipe dream, I said. She's selling them earth-friendly lies, Emma corrected. We gathered all evidence, photos of investors, HOA members, innocent residents fishing on trespassed land, and presented it in court. Emma filed for an emergency restraining order, including deeds, county records, HOA website screenshots, security footage, and time-stamped photos of trucks unloading, dock construction, and Wilkins handing out flyers. In the courtroom, Judge Harmon reviewed everything carefully, then said sharply to Emma, Are you telling me this HOA is trespassing, hosting commercial events, charging fees, and soliciting investments without the owner's consent? That's correct, Your Honor, Emma replied calmly. The judge immediately issued a ban, effective now. That afternoon, we hired a private security firm to enforce the order, post no trespassing signs, and clear the lakefront by dawn. We also got bold red and white signs printed. Private property, no trespassing, court order in effect. We kept quiet, no emails or letters, letting the HOA come in the morning to find everything changed. This is your boundary, Emma said by the dock under the moonlight. No, I said softly. This is the line they crossed. At sunrise, the lakefront buzzed. Cars, music, tents, and a new dock proudly displayed HOA logos. At 10 a.m., a deputy sheriff arrived with the court order. Emma, the officer, and I walked onto the lawn. Conversations died, heads turned. Gerald Thompson paused from grilling, confused. The deputy announced, This event is on private property without consent. By order of Judge Harmon, all unauthorized persons must leave immediately. Silence. Whispers. Private property? I thought it was community land. Who owns it? Emma stepped forward, calm but authoritative. This is Lake Sullivan, she said. It has been privately owned by Jake Sullivan and his family since 1953. The HOA has never had any legal authority over this land or water. The court has reviewed the evidence and issued an injunction prohibiting further trespass. She held up a copy of the order. Clear, sealed, official. I walked towards her, holding the original copy of the book title in my hand. This lake belongs to my grandfather, I said, my voice flat. He has used it, built on it, even profited from it, without permission, for years. Now it stops. Gerald pushed through the crowd, red-faced and embarrassed. This is a mistake, he shouted. We have been hosting this tournament for 15 years. And not one of those years was with consent. Why break us? Emma replied harshly. You trespassed and deceived the residents into believing they had access they never had. Richard Wilkins emerged from behind one of the investor tents. His suit rumpled, his expression no longer smug. This is a public embarrassment, he hissed. We can work this out. Why are you doing this? Public embarrassment? I snapped. You lied to your residents. You lied to your investors. You lied to yourself. A villager stepped forward, holding a fishing rod and looking genuinely confused. We pay HOA fees for this pool, he said. They told us it was ours. Emma turned to the crowd. They were wrong. The whispers grew louder. People exchanged glances. Some looked at Richard. Others looked at the signs they had passed this morning. No trespassing. Court order in effect. And behind them, investors packed up, spoke curtly and avoided eye contact. Richard looked at me, jaw clenched. You don't know what you've done. I have connections in this district that you can't even imagine. This isn't over. You're going to pay. His attempts at intimidation might have worked on others, but after years of high-stakes business negotiations in Silicon Valley, his threats seemed almost comical. I looked at him calmly. Actually, Richard, I thought, but if you want to continue, you should know that I have a recording of you telling your investors that you control my team and are negotiating with me. I smiled, calm and clear. No, Richard. I know exactly what I did. At the time, Sarah Lynn's article was published on the front page of the County Maple. The neighbors stopped whispering. They were shouting. Title not to be missed. Private lakes, public lies, how the community was deceived by the HOA. The story exposes the truth. Sullivan Lake has never been under the control of an HOA. The so-called exclusive access sold to residents was an illusion, maintained through confident and unchallenged repetition. And the money, thousands of dollars collected in lake maintenance fees over the years, is now the focus of suspicion. Within hours, people were demanding answers. At the emergency meeting that evening, the community center was filled not with polite listeners, but with angry homeowners holding printed affidavits, bulletins marked up with highlighters, and HOA bills from years ago. You told us this lake was part of our dues, a woman said, shaking a stack of papers. Where did that money really go? Another man added, we paid for the permit, for the event, for security. If nothing is legal, who gets paid, and for what? The pressure was on. The questions poured in, specific, organized, relentless. They weren't just angry about the lake anymore. They want financial records. They want to be audited. They want to know the truth. This time, vague answers wouldn't suffice. The board's once unquestioned authority was challenged, with all homeowners as the jury. When the board shrank behind their table amid screams, I stood, and silence fell. Not by my asking, but because they saw something in me. My name is Jake Sullivan, I said. My family has owned Sullivan Lake since 1953, but it's more than property lines or court orders. People listened. I welcome this community to enjoy the lake. My grandfather let kids fish off his dock. He believed water should be shared with respect, legally and honestly. I held up documents. Heads nodded. Eyes shifted from the board to me, not in anger, but hope. I shared the plan Emma and I had crafted, a non-profit trust, Lake Sullivan Conservancy, managed jointly by landowners and elected reps, with transparent, affordable permits, funding maintenance, conservation, and youth programs. No more hidden fees, no fake authority, just real management. This lake isn't for profit or power generation, I said softly. It's for all who respect it. For the first time, the room felt united. This was a beginning. Consequences came fast. Within 48 hours, resignations started. Karen Mitchell, the interim president, cited stress and broken trust. 2 others followed. One quietly, another forcibly removed after residents demanded financial transparency. By week's end, Maple Creek Estates HOA was near collapse, a hollow title without power. The county auditor launched a formal investigation after Emma filed paperwork revealing years of missing receipts, phantom budgets, and misappropriated event fees. The community turned from anger to action. A petition for a forensic audit circulated, gathering dozens of signatures in hours. Residents submitted decades of newsletters and receipts saved just in case. Journalists, lawyers, and neighbors openly spoke of terminology cheat and deception. Richard Wilkins? Gone. Office cleared, no forwarding address. But his name is neither forgotten nor forgiven. He and the board built a web of lies, now being dismantled brick by brick, not for revenge, but for justice. A week after the tournament chaos, Sarah Lynn's expose rocked Maple Creek Estates. HOA president's dark past exposed, fake degrees, fraud accusations in 2 states. As it turns out, Richard Wilkins isn't even his real name. He changed it 5 years ago after his real estate license was revoked in Florida for orchestrating a nearly identical scheme, falsifying property boundaries, charging illegal entrance fees, and soliciting investments in properties he didn't own. He evaded prosecution there by settling down and disappearing, only to reappear here in a new town, under a new name. So far, the district attorney's office confirmed they are reviewing new evidence for criminal prosecution, including fraud, embezzlement of HOA funds, and unauthorized use of private property for commercial gain. But Richard never answered any of those questions. One morning his house was found empty, the curtains drawn, the mailbox full. Neighbors said they had seen a moving truck the night before, after midnight. He disappeared the way he always did, quietly, under cover of darkness, leaving chaos behind. But this time, there were witnesses. There were documents. There was a community that refused to be lied to again. Richard Wilkins has fled. But what is the truth? The truth is still there. 2 months after the storm passed, the lake surface became calm again. Not just in the way the water settles in the early morning light, but in the way the community changes itself, rebuilds. The signs are gone. No more threats, no more fake regulations, no more HOA logos trying to claim something they never owned. In their place are new signs, hand-carved and carefully installed around the perimeter. Lake Sullivan Conservation Fund, private land, public access by permit managed in partnership with the Maple Creek community. It's not just a word, it's the truth. We established the trust with Emma's help and extensive community involvement. The board is made up of 3 longtime residents, people who have lived here through good times and bad, and 2 rotating landowner representatives. All licensing revenue goes directly to lake maintenance, water quality monitoring, and youth education programs. No bureaucracy, no power games. Just honest, transparent management. The old elite anglers club quietly dissolved, replaced by a new community group. Fishermen at Sullivan Lake. Open to everyone, with no special fees or VIP status. Just people who love fishing and respect the lake and land. Even Gerald Thompson, once skeptical, eventually softened. One evening, standing quietly on the new public pier, hat in hand, he looked out at the water and said, "My grandfather would love this. Simple. Honest." I nodded. That was all the apology I needed. On the day we officially opened the new East Lakeside Park, the very land the HOA tried to turn into a private resort, I placed a wooden sign beneath the tallest pine tree. It read, "In memory of James Sullivan. He taught us that water is life, and life can never be sold." But this was more than a plaque. Tied gently to the pier post was my grandfather's old fishing boat, the same boat he built and used to teach me how to fish. It was weathered, paint peeling and wood faded, but still seaworthy and strong. I never repainted or polished it because I didn't want to erase its history. That boat, like the lake itself, carries countless memories and stands as a living promise. Now, on quiet mornings, I still take that boat out. Sometimes with my friend Ray Delgado, sometimes alone. Just me, a thermos of coffee, and the endless calm water. I don't do it out of anger or defiance. I do it for peace, in memory of my grandfather and all he stood for. The HOA tried to break our community apart, selling pieces of the lake to gain power and profit. But we fought back and won, not just with court orders and legal battles, but with deliberate care, transparency, and respect for what this place truly means. Lake Sullivan is no longer just a victory. It's a living reminder. Justice isn't always about winning in court, but about reclaiming what's rightfully ours and protecting it for generations to come. Sometimes it's the creaking of an old boat on the dock, and a name carved in wood that no one can erase. Lesson: what happened at Sullivan Lake wasn't just about a boat, or a property line, or an HOA power trip. It was about something much deeper, something we all have to face at some point. When do you stop letting things go? And when do you start standing your ground? For years, HOAs have acted as if no one would question them. And most people don't. Because questioning takes time. It takes energy. It takes courage. But the truth is that bullies, bureaucrats, and manipulators thrive in silence. And sometimes, all it takes is a voice said, "No, not here, not anymore." If there is one thing my grandfather taught me, it is that ownership is not possession, but protection. He doesn't keep the lake clean because it's his. He does it because it's right. And now, that responsibility is mine. Ours. Because the things worth protecting, our land, our values, our memories, are not just inherited. They are earned. Constantly. If you've ever had to fight for what's yours, or for what's right, I'd love to hear your story. Drop it in the comments below. Or just let me know where you're listening from. Maybe you're sitting by the lake like me. Maybe you're stuck in another HOA meeting that went off track. Whatever the case, you are not alone. And if you find yourself in a battle between power and principle, choose the principle. Every time. Because sometimes the quietest victories are the ones that leave the most lasting mark. Jake Sullivan. Still fishing. Still fighting.